Michael York today said that comedy was much more difficult than tragedy. Did you believe that?
Yeah, well, I often wondered what it would be like to be in a serious play, a very tragic play, and you don't know how it's going. I think the only way you could tell is if the audience almost stops breathing, if they're so riveted that they'll suppress a cough. Mm-hmm. And that is difficult. That you don't know. I wonder, in tragedies, do they say, well, that matinee was better, they were better last night than they were at the matinee, and so forth. But in a way, to turn it around, tragedy is easy. I've given a couple of serious speeches, and you don't need the laughs. When you spend a lifetime coveting laughs in a childish way, and all of a sudden you make a serious speech, and you don't need that. You don't want that, and so that's the easy part. But I guess the comedians would disagree, and the tragedians would also disagree.
Acting. I mean, we just saw Michael York, and he's made a career out of Shakespearean acting and television acting, and just an actor. And clearly, what you do, but on stage, is a form of that. But being behind the camera, like we are now, is that something you ever thought you would like to do?
Oh, behind the camera?
Or no, in front of the camera. But it's in front of the camera.
Oh, acting?
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of acting. It's when you're doing your own material, it's so easy. The conversation comes very easy because I wrote the material. It's conversational, and I have tried memorizing Shakespeare, just for my own curiosity. Robert McNeil, who used to be Jim Lehrer's co-host, wrote a book about language, and he had a couple of paragraphs from Henry V, the famous one, "Tomorrow is the day of whatever." And see, I can't remember that. And I couldn't get 2 sentences out. I could not do it. And one time at Chautauqua, I had a bit part in Shakespeare's Measure for Measure. And I only had about 5 lines, but it was very difficult because it wasn't American language. They wake him, I'm a drunk in prison, and they wake me up, they're going to behead me. And his name was Barnardine. "What ho, Barnardine?" And I say, "Away, pox on your throat! Away, you rogues! I'm sleepy." And Shakespeare wrote, "I'm sleepy." You don't say that. You say, "I'm sleepy. I'm trying to get some sleep." Okay? But Shakespeare, "I'm sleepy." And that was difficult. And it just doesn't flow. It's supposed to flow. You think with Shakespeare, it's poetic and flow, but not to me it doesn't. So what am I saying? I'm a better writer than Shakespeare. If you want to put it that way, fine.
You started at the Shoreham when?
Well, the Shoreham Hotel in Washington, it's in its day, it's been refurbished. It's an Omni now. They put millions of dollars, but in the early 60s, I started there, and it was the best hotel in town. It was wonderful, and they had a big showroom with all of the name acts, Lena Horne and Milton Berle and Sammy Davis Jr. and Jack Benny even played there. And I was in the lounge. I was down the hall, and I did a late show at 1 in the morning after the big room closed, and the hotel just wanted whatever money they had left in their pockets. They wanted the babysitter money. They wanted the cab fare, and I did that. But prior to that, I was at a little hotel on Capitol Hill, which is torn down now. It was a smoke-filled, quintessential room with lobbyists and congressional staff people, senators and congressmen, and the manager of the hotel was kind of a ne'er-do-well, and he would bring in women for the members of Congress to meet. Oh my goodness. And so now I can tell you, it was so long ago, the hotel's torn down, the manager's dead, the owner's dead, all the members of Congress are dead, all the staff people are dead, the lobbyists are dead, and I can now tell you I was a piano player in a whorehouse.
Lunch is ready.
Well, that's a good starting point.
Would pause, and they couldn't jump in there because he's George Shultz. And they couldn't interrupt him. And he was probably the last politician who didn't care about the dead air. Mm-hmm. It was agonizing to watch, but he would be thoughtful and think about his answers. Nobody thinks. They just blurt it out.
Absolutely. Speaking of actors, we were talking about Michael York, your acting career, his acting career, being at the showroom and looking for material, and your material's right there in Washington among the various congressmen and elected officials and some non-elected. Do you get a sense just generally that a lot of that's acting? You know, they got an audience, they have a constituency, and they're just sort of acting, or is there in fact the genuineness?
There was a couple of literal actors in the Congress. There was a congressman from Pennsylvania named Dan Flood, and he had been a Shakespearean actor. He had a wax mustache. Mm-hmm. He had dyed black hair. He actually wore a cape. Now his district is the coal region of Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre, and he would actually go down into coal mines to campaign and get the votes of the workers wearing a cape, a red silk-lined black cape. And so you think, well, I mean, how could he ever get elected like that in the first place from a blue-collar area? Well, it's the old thing about he's ours.
Right.
It's like in Harlem, there are cathedrals in Harlem, and people say, well, how obscene, people living in gross poverty in Harlem, and here's these churches with these Gothic spires and everything. And of course the answer is, I live in a hovel, I don't want to worship in one.
Right. Speaking of Harlem, Adam Clayton Powell, did your paths cross?
Yeah, Adam Clayton Powell was the Harlem congressman for many years. Now, he's been out of office probably for 40 years, and he's only had, that's Charlie Rangel's district now. Charles Rangel, another Democrat, and I think he beat Adam Clayton Powell in the primaries. And Adam Clayton Powell was a playboy. Mm-hmm. He was married for a while to the jazz pianist Hazel Scott. He was a reverend. He had his I think it was the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, and he was always getting in trouble. He was finally censured for spending too much time at his beach house down in Bimini, and there were a couple of things going on in the news that week. He was at Bimini, and it was the God is Dead movement. There was a God is Dead movement back in the 60s. Vietnam was going on, and there was this Time magazine that week, Is God Dead? Mm-hmm. See? And so I put two issues together to the song from Mary Poppins, Chim Chimney. Bim Bimini, Bim Bimini, God isn't dead. Congressman Powell's replaced him instead. And the timeliness of that, you got a big laugh, and if you do it right, a week later, that's a hazard of this. A week later, that got nothing. Yeah. It might have got a little, that's fairly amusing. Yes, you're talking about something a week ago? Come on. But I would talk about him, and he could blend into an audience. He would come into the showroom, and if he was with one person, maybe he was with a lady, and he didn't want to be noticed. And I knew that, and he would sit in the back of the room. Other times he'd come in with 12 people, and then he'd want attention. So then he would sit right at ringside. But he was in the back of the room, and I'd be talking about people around him, don't even know that he's there. But he was an actor. Mm-hmm. Hubert Humphrey was an actor. Hubert Humphrey always had that reputation of exaggerating and the loquaciousness. And so I'd say, well, Hubert once went to Rome, and he had a nonstop conversation in the Vatican with the statue of Pius XII. And I actually had a joke about Hubert Humphrey that it became apocryphal to the point where it becomes fact. And it was somebody at his funeral actually quoted my line as actual fact. But I made it up. And I said that Hubert was making a speech in a campaign, and there was a heckler in the audience. He threw a tomato at him. And the tomato hit Humphrey, and without missing a beat, he said, "Speaking of agriculture." Never happened. Never happened. I made up a joke about Sergeant Shriver. Shriver was running for vice president in 72, and at times he ran for president. Sergeant Shriver, he goes to Buffalo. He goes to the Bethlehem steel plant when it was open. And this was in the paper. I'm reading this. Ah, yes, Bethlehem steel plant. I know where that is. And then he went across the street to a bar where the workers went after the day shift. And there is a bar across the street from there. Well, that was the end of it. So I took it from there. Shriver was very elegant, sophisticated, a bit of a dandy, a bit of an actor himself in his day, you know. And I picture he's got to stand in front of Bethlehem steel plant, greet the workers, and he has a aristocratic accent. And what a paradox.
Right.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Shriver. Appreciate your vote. So what was it like? He was across the street in the bar. Probably wore a hard hat to blend in, which didn't go with the tasseled Gucci loafers, you know. So he's doing pretty well. He's doing pretty good. Hi. And then he blew it when he bellied up to the bar and ordered a Courvoisier. Never had. That is fact. That became fact.
Mm-hmm. So you're rewriting history. You're a revisionist.
No, I'm a bullshit artist.
Well, you know, as I told you, one of the things I did in my earlier eclectic life at age 10 and 11, I'd write to senators. This is the early 60s, and I'm going to just show you some of these guys that they too were actors, and to the extent that some of these may have been fodder for you in the 60s, like Sam Ervin.
Well, fodder, I mean, Sam Ervin was a major figure in the Watergate case. And the Watergate case, which brought about the resignation and near impeachment of Richard Nixon, was in two parts. First year was the Senate hearings, and the second part were the House hearings, and it was the House committee that came close to impeaching Nixon. Sam Ervin of North Carolina was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, a Democrat. And then the ranking member for the Republicans was Howard Baker, who coined one of the most well-known phrases from that era: what did the president know and when does he know it? Mm-hmm. And then there's been many versions of that, like as we speak. What does the president know, and does he have any idea that he knows? But Sam Ervin, he had been a judge in North Carolina, and he had a very thick Southern accent. As a matter of fact, he was so genuine. He was such a quintessential Southern politician that when they made the movie Advise and Consent, directed by Otto Preminger, Charles Laughton, a British actor, played a Southern senator, and his coach was Senator Sam Ervin. That was long before Watergate. But Ervin, but he would tell these anecdotes. They would get so intense at those hearings that they would take a break, just for their own sanity, and lapse into anecdotes, courtroom anecdotes. And Ervin would tell these Southern stories, and then Howard Baker would chime in with the Southern stories. And then a year later on the House side, there was a congressman named Bill Hungate, and he was a folksy guy. In fact, he was so folksy, his district was Hannibal, Missouri, Mark Twain's hometown. Mm-hmm. And so he would accuse his Republican opponents, and he would say something like an elephant could walk into this room right now, and you guys would say it was a mouse with a thyroid condition. So who else you owe?
Oh, here's another one. Just keep throwing some of these at you.
Well, Barry Goldwater was a villain. The Democrats hated him, the liberals hated him. He was scary. He ran against Lyndon Johnson in 1964. And the Johnson campaign, that was one of the early examples of a candidate running a commercial that's so offensive, and then the candidate has to say, well, that wasn't me, that was about other people, I had no idea. This was before bloggers and everything, and it showed a little girl, but a little 6-year-old girl is plucking petals from a daisy. It's in political history, it's known as the daisy commercial. And the message was that if you let Goldwater, the world is going to blow up. We're all going to be dead, because Goldwater is such a radical, and they called him a fascist and everything. And so the little girl picking off, and the clock is ticking, and she's putting these little petals, and then she gets to the last one, and the world blows up. This is what will happen if Barry Goldwater is elected president. So he loses, and by a wide margin. And Art Buchwald had just come to Washington from France, where he had lived many years. And he had a joke along the lines of, he said, now remember, Lyndon Johnson won the election. Goldwater lost. And Art Buchwald said, they told me that if Barry Goldwater was elected president, if you vote for Barry Goldwater, the Vietnam War will widen. So I voted for Goldwater, and it did. So later, he spent a few years out of office, then he came back in Arizona. They loved him, and they elected him again. And after a while, he just became this lovable pussycat that the Democrats couldn't find any fault in. And he became my hero when he went on one of the late night shows, and he said, quote, all good Christians should kick Jerry Falwell in the ass. And I thought, it won't work. Goldwater will only turn the other cheek. Or Falwell will only turn the other cheek.
Oh, all right, here's another one.
This is Estes Kefauver of Tennessee. Before I got into this as a political satirist, when I had little interest in it, I was aware of Kefauver. Number one, he was the nominee for vice president in '56. He was Adlai Stevenson's running mate in '56. And John Kennedy, a fairly little-known senator, ran against Kefauver for a little bit of a time, but Kefauver became the vice president. But most Americans knew him because he conducted hearings against the mafia, investigating the mafia. And the hearings were done in New York, and he'd go to New York, and he'd call up people like Frank Costello and other mafia figures. And I met him briefly. I first started playing the piano at this little place on Capitol Hill, and we needed favors from the Senate. We needed to get the drinking laws in D.C. Broadened so you could have a mixed drink at a bar. You couldn't in Washington. If you wanted a mixed drink, you had to be seated at a table. If you were seated at a bar, you could only drink beer or wine. And that was such a major concern in those days. And so we thought, well, maybe if we, in a way, I was a corrupt lobbyist when I look back on this, because my job, the manager of the hotel, he says, look, I want you to run an errand. I want you to take this bottle of whiskey and put it in a bag and take it over to Senator Kefauver's office. That's what I did. I did that. I wasn't sure why. I thought it was very exciting, romantic to go over there with and not be a tourist, you know, and to go into the office. And I later did the same thing. I used to hang out in an Irish bar in Washington called Matt Cain's, and so I told Matt Cain one afternoon, I said, I'm going up the hills to see what's going on. He said, well, do me a favor, if you got your car. I said, yeah. He said, well, take this case of Harp beer. It's like Guinness, and take it up to Tip O'Neill's office. Mm-hmm. So I did. I was a delivery boy. I walked in there. I got this for Congressman O'Neill. It's, oh, right, sir. And I go right in there, and I go right into his office. And he said, well, might as well get to work on this, kid. And so we we drank a lot of that case, and so then he had another door. I think I went in another door. There was a way where the people in the waiting room couldn't see me delivering this beer. But that's how I met Tip O'Neill. Total bribery.
Mission. This was one of our own here who had a unique role of life.
Al D'Amato, what was he? He was when D'Amato was elected to the Senate, the United States Senate in New York. He hadn't been a congressman. He hadn't been in the state Senate, as I recall. He wasn't in the legislature. He was something like what was he? The comptroller of Hempstead, Long Island, or something like that. Is that what it was? And so that made quite an impression. All of a sudden, this happens from time to time. They get to be senators without paying dues in the House or in the state legislature. And all I can think of D'Amato, he got a little bit too relaxed on the Don Imus show one morning. And it was during the O.J. Simpson hearings. And O.J. Simpson, the judge was Judge Ito, who was a Japanese American in Los Angeles. And you go on a show like Imus, and it's fun, you know. We're not getting terribly serious here. We're schmoozing, and D'Amato schmoozed. He over schmoozed that morning. And this is it seemed to be a little out of character. And I'm listening to this, and he's starting to talk about Judge Ito. But he doesn't say Judge Ito. All of a sudden, he's doing this crude accent. Oh, Judge Ito say, and oh, well, all hell broke loose. How did D'Amato wind up? Did he lose an election? Yeah, I don't know if that was. I don't think there are enough Japanese Americans in New York State to tip it for him. But he had been in a long time, and sometimes they stay a little long.
Yep, no question he did. Here's this is a golden oldie. I don't know if your paths had crossed with his, but certainly had a character.
This was Wayne Morris of Oregon. Wayne Morris had been a Republican, and then he became a Democrat, probably during the 60s, I guess, when we were really sharply divided and the Republicans were getting more conservative and the Democrats were getting more liberal. And so Wayne Morris became a champion of liberalism, which was risk-free in Oregon. He ran for president as a dark horse. I have a campaign button at home. He ran in the District of Columbia primary for president of the United States. But his legacy is that he was one of two senators who voted for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which really led to a widening of the Vietnam War. Out of the entire Senate, let's say the vote was 98-2 in favor. We thought we had been attacked. The jury is still out on that, whether the attack was phony or misperceived or what. There's a great, in the Robert McNamara documentary, The Fog of War, and I was always a little fuzzy on the Gulf of Tonkin resolutions. There was an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin over there in Vietnam, Southeast Asia, and they explain it pretty well. There's a story, there's a case that could be made that instead of picking up a torpedo on their sonar, it was a fish or something. I don't know. But this horrible tragedy of Vietnam with 50,000 names on the Vietnam Wall came out of a misunderstanding in the Gulf. And Wayne Morris was one of two senators. He and Senator Ernest Greening of Alaska voted against it. Now, and one of the first, when I first started writing songs and things about this stuff, there was a woman named Claire Booth Luce, who was a New York politician, and she was married to Henry Luce, the publisher of Time magazine, and she was nominated to be ambassador to Brazil, and Morse was against it. And she was very shrill and colorful. She was very attractive. She had been an actress and playwright. But she went after Morse, and she had found out that Morse had been kicked in the head by a horse down at Everett Dirkson's farm in rural Virginia. So there was my first rhyme, Morse and horse. I don't even remember what the melody was or what the song was, but there it is. I don't even know. Oh, this is a very old picture of Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. He was a segregationist, but then the reality of the times in our country, they say that when the blacks got the vote down there, and they used to say, well, Strom might not be the smartest guy in the world, but he can count, meaning he could count the votes. And so he had black people in his staff, in his office, and everything like that. And but he had been a segregationist, and a very outspoken one. And he ran for president in '48. Walked out of the convention in '48, the convention that nominated Harry Truman. He formed the Dixiecrat Party, and so he was a target for many years. He was well into his 90s when he died. Maybe he was 100, and he overstayed his time in the Senate. And they had his 100th birthday party on Capitol Hill, and Trent Lott got up there at the party. There were some cameras in the room, and just said, well, if Strom Thurmond had been president, we wouldn't have had all that trouble that we've had. And everybody went crazy over that, and Trent Lott lost his leadership post in the Senate. Now, this came up the other day as we speak. The bloggers, there was an article in New Yorker magazine about the bloggers, and it was written by Nicholas Lehman, who was the dean of this Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia University. He said the only thing the bloggers can really take credit for is bringing down Trent Lott because of what he said at Strom Thurmond's birthday party. I had a lot of fun with that, and I joined the hue and cry to bring him down, but I was probably a little disingenuous about that, because I thought, you know, the guy is doing what we say in showbiz, shtick. He was doing shtick. He was clowning around again, as was Al D'Amato on imitating Judge Ito. See, they're clowning. He didn't literally mean that we should, if we had segregation in the South, we'd have been a better country. He didn't mean that. But when you're dealing with the mass audience like that, and if there's a camera in there, and you're a public figure, and you're the majority leader of the Senate, it's not fair, but it's reality. and you can't do it.
We're going to stop for just 1 second because I'm going to move you. Do you find that what you just talked about with Trent Lott, does that affect you, and does it give you some sort of self-censorship as to some of the stuff you pull together, knowing that, well, I got an audience, I know they think I'm a satirist, I'm a comedian that can have some license, but is there a point where you say, I better not go beyond that?
Oh, you better go beyond that these days,
right,
or you're going to be perceived as being too mild, too lame, too easy on them. It's just as the criticism is just as tough when they say, "Well, you're too easy on them," than, "Well, you're vitriolic and you're mean."
Mm-hmm.
See, so you try and maintain a little bit of a balance. But when you're scratching your head and you say, "Gee, should I go there?" You really should go there,
right,
and take the heat rather than take the other kind of heat that you backed off.
Have you had some incidents where the benefactor, I use the term loosely, didn't take too kindly and actually confronted you?
Where the person I joke about personally came up to me, no. Maybe their supporters might do it, their staffers back when I was only working locally in Washington. But that's all gone now. That whole mood is gone. This is a tough arena. This is tough, and you're going to be compared. I mean, I say there's no way I'm going to try and be a brash 22-year-old comedian. That'd be kind of stupid, pathetic. And so I just try to be myself and call them as I see them. But I know that in the minds of some, they say, "Well, you're too easy on them, or you're too tough on them." And after any given show, I have a bell. I'll have people say, "Well, you're really mean to the president," and then have others say, "Well, you let him off easy."
Right.
And so that's good. I say, "Thank you very much." So that's fine.
Has there been folks that, as you reflect back on all the years you've done this, which have been difficult marks to get, hard to get a caricature which would in fact play well, who in fact is a national figure?
Well, you don't make a caricature. The figure makes a caricature of himself,
Right.
and then you just play off of that. It's not good to be predictable, but you have to be predictable. If an audience, if some big deal happens on a particular day, Dick Cheney shoots a guy, or Trent Lott made a fool of himself, or Bush did that, or Gore did that. And I've got a show that night, and if you were to quiz the audience, what do you think Russell's going to talk about? They'll say, "Well, I hope he does this, I hope he does that." And if I don't do that, then I should be sued for malpractice. So my friend Mort Saul, he always prides himself on the fact that he doesn't be very obvious. My guess is that maybe the day Cheney shot that guy, that Mort didn't even talk about it. And he's proud of that. And he also says he never tells jokes. That's another thing. You should never tell joke. God forbid if you tell joke. I tell jokes. I'll tell a joke that I didn't even write, just as sort of a comedy helper. Get it going. Jumpstart it a little bit, and then I'll move on. I don't tell a lot of those. I might tell one or two in an hour and a half show. I do that because. I'm of that school, for one thing. We tell jokes, but not too many. Not too many.
What's the genesis of a story? Tell me how Mark Russell reads the New York Times, the Washington Post. What's your source of information? I read it, or is it from all media?
Well, it's mostly from the print. I'm not too swift with the computer. The way I see it, an awful lot of the television they take their cues from print. They're taking an awful lot of cues from the internet and from the bloggers. The bloggers, the television news people are treating those bloggers like saints, because they never sneer at them, because if they sneered at them, they'd be perceived as being too old. They will skew old. So they don't dare sneer at the bloggers at all. But I'm a print guy. I like to hold the paper and go from there. And so as we speak, Joe Lieberman just lost the Democratic primary in Connecticut in the summer of 2006, and it was over the war. And a guy who came out of nowhere named Ned Lamont is a single issue candidate, says, we got to stop this war. I can stop this war. Lieberman is out of touch. Lieberman is too close to George Bush. He votes with George Bush too often, and the voters believed him, and the voters voted for Lamont to win this primary. And so, and Lieberman is going to announce, Lieberman announced he's going to run as an independent. We don't know, as we sit here speaking, how that turned out. I'll predict now that Lieberman's going to lose. Mm-hmm. I just think it's going to be kind of sad. So the way I saw it, I'm watching Lieberman, and I said, well, he made two promises when he lost the election. He promised that he was going to run as an independent, and also that he was no longer sleeping with George Bush. Those are his two promises there. So then, 2 days later, the British arrest 21 suspected hijackers. They plan to blow up 10 American planes flying from England to the United States, and overnight Americans are lulled out of their complacency, and all of a sudden we're thinking about security again. And so the way I looked at it, Joe Lieberman wants a recount.
And you, as you see, that's the headlines, and those are the stories, and those you pick out the couple of pieces of the Joe Lieberman story, and then does your mind click along to a known tune that you will try to place that to, or when do you decide that it's a musical, and when do you decide it's just a story? Well,
I don't write a song on something that's going to blow over in a couple of days.
Right.
It's just a waste of time. I rarely can do the song the day I write it. I don't use notes, and this is just the logistics of it. But so I'll for a long time now, I sort of played off the fact that we were red states and blue states, and so I wrote a parody on "This land is your land. These states are your states. These states are my states. Some are red states, some are blue states, some are metro, some are retro. This family feud belongs to you and me. Red states have school prayer, tax cuts for millionaires. Blue states have liberal flakes and same-sex wedding cakes. Red creation, blue evolution. This monkey house belongs to you and me. So that song, as I put it right at the beginning of the show, it kind of sets the tone. Here we are, and it was evenly balanced, and it was not terribly topical. So that served me pretty well. Now I'm working on a song for Washington, D.C. Invite people to Washington. It's to the tune. There's no connection, but the melody is nothing like a dame from South Pacific. So greetings from Washington, where the mottos pass the buck. We're the capital of the nation, but the nation thinks we suck. Exhibit A is Congress, where with intelligence devoid, their number one priority is just to stay employed. So, and then let's see, I just wrote this yesterday. We're fighting wars around the world. The Mideast is ablaze, but Congress steps up to the plate and says no marriages for gays. To fill our tanks with gas costs requires more money than you've earned, but Congress meets the challenge and says, the flag thou shalt not burn.
Now, do you run that by Allie? Is she your
No.
ultimate critic?
Run it by my wife? No. If I try jokes out on my wife, if she doesn't laugh, I'm offended. If she does laugh, there's always the possibility that she's faking it, so it just doesn't work. You've got to try it out on an audience. Take a chance, but just try it out on one or two people. It's not. If you have any doubts, you maybe shouldn't do it at all.
Right.
Once in a while, you get surprised where the laugh will come where you didn't expect it, and you figure, what's that about?
Right.
What am I? That's good. I'm glad, but I don't know why they laugh.
As you covered Congress, guys like Everett Dirksen, what's he mean to you? Because he seemingly had the attention of a lot of folks, and probably also was a source of songs and vignettes.
It's a shame how some of these people are totally forgotten, and only political junkies like us remember them. Because most senators and congressmen, they kind of look alike, they're media figures, but Everett Dirksen was a crumpled, wrinkled-faced old codger from Illinois, and his voice was wonderful, and he talked like this. And he would make a speech, and he would say, "Now I want all you ladies to get comfortable in your girdles, because although my speech is only 3 pages long, with my delivery, it will take me an hour to deliver it."
This is great, by the way.
And Dirksen, he was very instrumental in passing the civil rights legislation of the 60s, the Voters Act. He delivered Republican votes in the Senate that Lyndon Johnson needed to pass these landmark pieces of legislation, and Dirksen did that. And that was back when the Republicans were in the minority. He was a minority leader of the Senate.
Just early television for me, I remember the Ev and Charlie show.
Yeah, it was Ev and Charlie show. Charles Hallett, is that his name? Hallett?
Halleck, I think.
Halleck was the minority leader of the House, and Dirksen was the minority leader of the Senate. And it would be like a rebuttal. The Democrats had the say. The Democrats ruled the roost. They were like the Republicans are today. They control the White House, and the Senate, and the House, and the Supreme Court, and the media. Just the way the Republicans control the media today. And so Dirksen, he was an actor. We were talking about actors. They used to have these roasts at the National Press Club. And one time I emceed a roast between Everett Dirksen, the old Republican, and a brand new freshman Democrat from Arizona named Mo Udall. And Udall was very funny when he came along, but this day we didn't know him too well. And Dirksen had made his speech, and it was very, very funny. And now it's Udall's turn. So Dirksen takes his seat, and he crosses in front of Udall as Udall is getting up to the microphone. And Dirksen makes a grand motion of handing Udall his cigarette to hold. Hold this, Mo. But Udall later was one of the great, great wits of the Congress, and he would imitate a blowhard congressman himself. he would get up there and he'd have these long salutations. My friends, as Lyndon Johnson used to say, my heart's as heavy as a bucket of hog liver tonight, and go on like that.
You love these guys, don't you?
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. That's the paradox. I do like them. I like them on an individual basis. I go along with the 230-year-old joke that Congress is a bunch of ninnies. That's accepted. We should brag about that to foreign countries.
Sure.
This system is messed up as it is, and we've had this 200-year-old reference. When Mark Twain said that members of Congress were certifiably insane, I don't think he said it with a smile on his face. Well, he never smiled anyway, Mark Twain, as far as I can discern. He meant it. Mark Twain meant it. Yeah, he called Congress a criminal class. He called Theodore Roosevelt insane. No guile or irony, a flat-out statement.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah. So I go along with that. But they're likable people. Most of them are likable people. There've been some slime balls, guys who, remember they were caught up in a sting called Abscam, and they're on tape taking bribes, on videotape bragging about how powerful they are. Yeah, but you get 535 people, you're going to get some slime balls.
Have you ever gotten close to any of them, and to the extent, or do you have to feel like there's got to be some distance?
There should be distance. The fact that I live in Washington, D.C., it makes it look like I'm a little cozy, and I'm not. Funny, I get to know some of these guys when they leave office. Years after Gerald Ford was in the White House, I would go to Vail, Colorado, and do a couple of benefits. I did a couple of benefits for the Betty Ford Clinic. You get to know these people afterwards. Alan Simpson, I didn't know him too well in the Senate, but I know him now. And you just get to know these people. But there were a couple of cases years ago when I was just working locally and got to know somebody, and then he became notorious in the wrong way, shall we put it.
Right.
So what am I going to do? I'm going to leave him out and then say, what are you, a double standard here? He's your friend, you leave him out. So with Tip O'Neill, we had this a thing called Korea Gate, and there was a Korean lobbyist named Tong Sun Park. Tong Sun Park was sort of a Korean Jack Abramoff on a smaller scale, but it was a big deal at the time, and he was a very he was a charming man, kind of a slippery man, and he hired me to entertain at some of his parties, and one of the parties was to honor Tip O'Neill. And so they started investigating Tongson Park, and he left the country. And they have to extradite him. So they're trying to extradite him, so I imagined him coming back to town. And so I wrote a parody on that old Irish song where the lad comes back to Ireland after being in America, and he comes back to the family, and they're so happy to see him. Oh, welcome, Pat, to dear old Donegal. Shake hands with your Uncle Mike, me boy, and here's your sister Kate, and there's the girl you used to. So I made it Tongsun Park, and he comes back, and he had the same melody, and all I said, shake hands with your Uncle Tip, my boy. And that's all. That's all that was in it. I didn't say anything else, but it got back to Tip O'Neill that I had worked him into a song about Tongson Park, and he didn't like it. He didn't like it. later on, he was nice, but and he always was nice. But I mean, it got back to me that Tip doesn't like your song, and he's not coming into the showroom until you stop doing that song.
All right. Did you get much of that at all?
No, not on a personal. Years later, years later, somebody would say, "Well, I didn't like what you did to me 20 years ago," or something like that.
Right.
And I, what can you say? I say, well, I had a discipline problem. I'm kinder now. I'm older now.
Did you have a sense when you were in Buffalo, New York, and a year here in Jamestown, there's no role model for what you're doing? You sort of created something out of whole cloth. Is there something in your background which would have given us later, if I were a biographer, to say there's a connect?
Well, I've had people like yourself try and answer that question themselves. They kind of shrink with me. And I remember there was a woman from the Washington Post, and she said, "I know why you do what you do. You're getting even with the nuns in parochial school. You're attacking authority to get even with the nuns and the priests and all that." And so no comment. Or probably I'm getting even with with my drill instructor at Marine Corps boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina. And that's my way of, I mean, I'm being facetious here, but one thing that I carried with me from the Marine Corps, and I was just a PFC, and then I went up to corporal for a while, and then because of another lapse in discipline, one unfortunate night I went back to PFC. But we were always told, whenever we griped or complained about anything, they say, they tell us two things. They say, yours is not the reason why, yours is but to do or die. And the other thing they tell us is, you're not supposed to know the big picture. It's for us, the officers, to know. It's for us, the master sergeants, to know. And the colonel knows the big picture, but you just shut up and do what you're told. Mm-hmm. And so to this day, by analyzing Washington and watching our leaders, I'm still trying to find out the big picture. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm still trying. And so the idea of jokes, I remember my father telling me about Will Rogers. In fact, one time we drove across the country and we went out of our way on Route 66 when I was a kid to Claremore, Oklahoma, and it was at night, and we drove up to Will Rogers' grave, and it's a big grave, a big sign and everything, and then with the headlights of the car, he took a picture of the grave. And my parents were not political at all. They didn't read Time magazine, or New Yorker. Reader's Digest. I mean, that sort of covered. They bought into that theory of Reader's Digest. If you read Reader's Digest, you don't need anything else, because we've got excerpts from other magazines. So they were not political. But everybody knew Will Rogers, mm-hmm. and so that made an impression on me, what he did.
I suppose it's even hard just to do have people try to do biographies of you? Are you...
Of me?
Yeah. No,
it's not worth it. I'm sort of on I've been on a celebrity cusp. It wouldn't be worth it. Willard Scott put it best. He said, "I'm at the twilight of a mediocre career." That kind of sounded. But no, I did. And even for me to write a biography would be a little presumptuous. I'm often put off by people who write their biography, and they make a big deal about writing their autobiography. You don't know who the hell they are.
Right.
So no.
Has anybody done a documentary? Is there? Let me back up. Is there film of your early career?
Well, the film goes back to the early shows on PBS, mm-hmm. and so the PBS show started in 1974, actually. But I mean, I wasn't that young. I was a late bloomer. I was in my 40s when I got my big break in showbiz, and so yeah, when the show was 25 years old, we made our own documentary, our own 1-hour documentary, and we've got early clips from that. You know, sort of a shrine of polyester, and, and those sideburns going up and down, hair.
Do you have imitators now? I mean, I'm thinking of Capital Steps. It's sort of a younger generation, but
I thought you meant well, yeah, Capital Steps. We don't regard each other as competitors. We regard each other as unindicted co-conspirators. But I've been imitated. They've imitated me on The Simpsons, and on Saturday Night Live, which is a great compliment. Yeah.
Right. Is there a time where you wake up and you say, I've got writer's block, and I should probably term you know, but I don't know what the next piece of the information, or is there just so much in the news on an ongoing basis that you just can't help but find stuff?
Well, when there's so much in the news, you don't have writer's block. You have writer's block when there's nothing. For example, we haven't had an August doldrums in a few years now. In this country. In 2005, we had Katrina. That was the end of August. In 2006, my gosh, we got the pipeline up in Alaska rusting out. We've got the 21 terrorists in England arrested, and so August is unfortunately it's a glut of news. But the blocks are just when there's nothing going on and you're getting kind of bored with things, and then you just look for generic. I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago about family reunions, because we had a family reunion in our family, and the next day there wasn't much going on in the news, and so I thought, well, our family reunions are what are they all about? You know, the family reunions are sort of a microcosm of the country itself these days. Hot, sweaty, and opinionated. And everybody's very very tactful at a family reunion. They might make a big deal about how the children have grown since they saw them last, but not how the adults have gotten fatter.
Did you try it on at the reunion?
No.
Do people, when you're in a social situation, do you find it awkward when people come up and say, Mark, can you play a couple of tunes?
Well, no, I like to play the piano. At parties. First thing I walk in, I see the piano, and I'm thinking, well, I'll be sitting there soon, I guess, if they didn't ask. But what goes with the territory is when you feel that the person you're talking to is not entertained. You're disappointing that person because all you're doing is just talking. Mm-hmm. And so if you're having dinner with strangers, and all you want is for somebody to pass the salt, and you start to say something and they all lean in waiting for this gem of wit, and all you're going to say is, please pass the salt. And I've had people, I had a lady one time a couple of years ago, and I don't know, I said, gee, it looks like it might rain. She said, oh, you can do better than that. So that goes with it. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was telling me about his fiance had a death in her family or something, and he's going to tell me about a personal tragedy, and he prefaces it by saying, there's nothing funny about this, but this guy's got cancer, and I interrupt him. I said, it doesn't have to be funny. Mm-hmm. You don't have to preface. I said, I understand what you're saying, and I'm complimented by you equate me with funny, but it doesn't. You don't have to say, if you're going to tell me some sad thing, I can take it.
Yeah. I'm going to show you a few more folks.
Okay.
my earlier life that may or may not ring a bell. But these a couple of Southern senators, Arkansas guys. Yep, all set.
Senator William Fulbright of Arkansas. Now he was a dove as far as the Vietnam War is concerned. He chaired some of the most prominent hearings when the nation was torn apart, and he would have Dean Rusk, the Secretary of State under Kennedy and Johnson. He broke with his fellow Democrat Lyndon Johnson over the war, but he was from Arkansas, so he came in the game as a segregationist. You couldn't be elected down there without being a segregationist, and he was. And here you have, but he later grew into this highly respected founder of the Fulbright Scholar. People study under the Fulbright Scholarship. But his opponents for a while, oh yeah, it was Senator Joseph McCarthy who called him half-bright. Half-bright. That was the example of Joe McCarthy's sophisticated wit, to call a guy named Fulbright half-bright. But, then he was defeated in the primary, just like Lieberman, by Dale Bumpers of Arkansas, another Democrat. So there's another example where you stay a little too long at the fair, and out you go.
Underneath that are probably John McClellan, and then there's Mario Cuomo.
Okay, McClellan, Arkansas again, senator. And, this is a good segue because Joseph McCarthy was the infamous senator who gave us the McCarthy era, McCarthyism. People committed suicide who had been blacklisted by McCarthy. He was a stumbling down drunk. He was very, very popular in this part of the country. In my hometown of Buffalo, they loved him because he was Irish and he was conservative, and he was had been a tail gunner and a bomber in World War II, and he was good old tail gunner Joe. But he was an evil man, and he was censured, and then he died. And then he was succeeded in his permanent Senate Subcommittee on Investigations by John McClellan. And it became the McClellan Committee. And so the first congressional hearing I ever attended in my life, when I started working at this little hotel, and I figured I better find out what's going on around here. I'm going to educate myself. And I started going to hearings, and the first hearings I went to were chaired by this Senator McClellan, and he was investigating the Teamsters Union. That was in 1958. Now, if you look at the old movies, the old clips of this committee, not only in the McCarthy era, but then under the successor, McClellan, there are always staff people behind them, handing them notes and whispering things into their ear. And among those people behind him was a young staffer named Robert F. Kennedy. And so that was the first time. People forget about him now, McClellan. Nobody remembers him.
He really took on Hoffa, though, as I recall. Wasn't it?
Yeah, he took on Hoffa, and so did Bobby. Now let's see. Now you go forward a little bit. Now I'm a little murky on this, but Bobby went after Hoffa
as Attorney General.
As Attorney General,
right.
Yeah, that's right. And so these people would come over to this little hotel where I worked at. And there'd be the Teamsters on one side of the room, and there'd be the senators on the other side of the room. And they would kind of stare each other down over their afternoon cocktails. And I didn't know who was who. I saw one guy, I thought he was one of the Teamster guys, tough, kind of a swarthy, jowly guy with a big cigar. And That's going to be on the Teamsters. No, it wasn't. It was Pierre Salinger, who also worked on the committee.
Now, was that a time before the Shoreham? Did you have your routine at that time when you were doing political?
It was developing into a routine. Yeah, it was very slapdash.
Right.
A lot of it was just joke telling, and people would sing along, and out-of-towners were outraged. They would come in there. They might be staying in the hotel. It was a touristy hotel because it was right near the Capitol, and people would be. I'd have sing-alongs at 7 o'clock at night. People didn't go home. They hadn't been home yet from their offices. And they'd say, "What's the celebration?" I know it's Tuesday. When the big Catholic shrine opened on the campus of Catholic University, the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, and every bishop and archbishop in the country came to Washington for the dedication, and the nearest hotel to the campus was this hotel on Capitol Hill. It was about 5 or 6 miles away, but it was the nearest hotel. So here are these bishops with their gold chains, and they just come in for a sandwich or a dinner, an evening meal, and they walk in, and here are these Capitol Hill people clowning around and singing, and there's this loud piano player singing, and they didn't know quite what to make of it.
Do you sense your audience and the topics that they may play in the audience, or do you kind of walk in with a set in mind?
It's set, but what's fluid would be the first 5 minutes or so. And so I tailor it. Everybody does that. If they're doctors, we tailor it. If they're lawyers, if they're in the construction business, or if they're nurses, or whatever. Or if it isn't a private group, a specific group, what the town is. That's all. You just tailor it that way, and then you just segue into whatever you're going to do. When I do this thing about the Supreme Court a couple of years ago gave full constitutional protection to consensual gay sex, which prompted the ultra-conservative Justice Antonin Scalia to predict, and I quote, "This will only lead to incest and bestiality." Now, first of all, bestiality is never consensual. So Scalia, he did say that. And I may be off by a word or two, but who did say that verbatim, "This will only lead to incest and bestiality," was Senator Rick Santorum of Pennsylvania. So if I'm in Pennsylvania, or if I'm near Pennsylvania, then I'll make it Santorum.
Right.
And it was accurate.
How much fair game is the Supreme Court?
Very fair game. If the Supreme Court is not fair game, we're no better than the Sunnis, the Iraqis.
Do you get any feedback from any of them at all?
From the Supreme Court?
Any of those guys?
No, I have done that little bit with Scalia in the audience. No. No, they rise above it. They rise the minute their confirmations are over with, and they finally get in there. They are in an ivory tower for the rest of their natural lives, and they rise above it. They really do. And I did a performance in the court itself years ago. Chief Justice Warren Burger thought I would be just right for this dinner that they used to have in the court. It was a stag dinner, really against the law when you think about it, to bar women, but they did. There were no women on the court then, but still. And it was all appellate judges and the high mucky mucks of jurisprudence. And let me just say it was a mistake to book me there, because I really bombed, and nobody wanted to be the first one to laugh, I guess, and it was just the trappings. And I thought, well, if this was off at in a bar somewhere, a hotel, dining room, Shoreham Hotel. Then they might have loosened up a little bit, but they're sitting there in the Supreme Court, in their private dining room. And it was so quiet I could almost hear the building settling. I could hear the whir of the air conditioning. And there was this oil painting of Justice Marshall staring down at me. It was a disaster. So I wrote about it. I blew their cover. You were not supposed to admit that this dinner existed. It was called the Fred Vinson dinner after a former Chief Justice. And they all knew for years if a media reporter wanted to ask you about this, you didn't tell them anything about the dinner. And they might say, well, what was served at the dinner? Well, I don't know. Well, who was there? I don't know. Well, why don't you know? Because there was no dinner. You don't admit to its existence. So I was a little, I felt sorry for myself afterwards, and I did an interview for a local magazine, and the article was called "The Night I Laid an Egg at the Supreme Court," and they put me on the cover, and I'm standing there with a microphone, and I'm looking at the egg I just laid, and what they did, they spray painted a watermelon white, and that was the egg that was on the floor, and I had just laid it.
Any feedback from that? Because that really was, that's an expose.
It was.
Yeah.
Never heard a thing.
Yeah.
No, they are very tight-lipped. But it's been wonderful material over the years. Clarence Thomas and Robert Bork. Bork is still sulking. When was that? It was in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was in the 80s. He's still sulking about that. And his name is a verb now. I've been borked.
Right.
So-and-so has been borked. And so I did sit next to Chief Justice John Roberts a few months ago at a dinner, and I sat next to him. And then and on my other side was the Archbishop of Washington, Cardinal McCarrick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got up to speak, and I said, what a night, what an honor. Look who I'm sitting there with Cardinal McCarrick and our new Chief Justice, John Roberts. Wow. And are they nice guys? And I was filling in the Cardinal on some of the finer points of theology. And now the audience gets kind of quiet, see. Yes, he had some questions about doctrine, sacred doctrine, and the Chief Justice. What a charming man. He kept bending my ear all night long on stem cell research and abortion and the separation of powers. And it's deadly silent, see? And then I said, I couldn't shut him up. Well, with that, then they couldn't. I couldn't walk away. He's the Chief Justice.
That's wonderful.
So, if you the timing right. I mean, sometimes if you go over the top like that, it's a risk to go over the top. But Will Rogers would be speaking to a group of bankers, and he would address them as foreclosers on widows and orphans or something. And so I would do that. The American Chemical Association, chemical manufacturer, Dow Chemical. Good evening, rapers of the land, poisoners of the earth. And they don't mind that. It's as I say, you got to go overboard. You have to really hit them between the eyes, or they're just going to you're going to lose their attention.
You've had a chance to interface with some presidents, and as you were there, it was certainly the end of the Eisenhower era, the beginning of the Kennedy era. The Kennedys, did you get a sense as that was a great source of material for you? The Kennedys, for example, or that transition from Eisenhower to Kennedy, older, newer Republicans?
Yeah, they... It was literally that, old and new, and the best line about that was Russell Baker of the New York Times called the Eisenhower White House the tomb of the well-known soldier. Such a priceless line, And so the Kennedys came in. They were very, very youthful. Has there been anybody that young since in the White House when they came in? I guess not. And they were a zany bunch, and they were jumping into Bobby Kennedy's swimming pool in Virginia, and there was the Rat Pack. Sinatra was a Democrat then, and he wrote a parody on his own song, All the Way. I don't want to be cutting, but we've seen enough of putting, from Eisenhower all the way. But then all of that just seemed to be forgotten with the assassination, and when that happened, I was at the Shoreham Hotel, and the hotel almost went out, it almost folded. We were all laid off. We had there were 2 showrooms in the hotel. They both folded for a long time. Every convention that had been booked in Washington canceled for the following year. Mm-hmm. It was a real financial depression that took over that city for a long, long time because of that. And so then just coming back to work, and I was so, it was awful. I was a nervous wreck every night, because I was even afraid to say the word Texas, let alone Kennedy, or it was a different mood then. And the only one who really went straight at it was Lenny Bruce, but not on television. And he just criticized people who said that Jackie Kennedy was so brave and stalwart under these conditions. And he said, no, she was leaning over the car. She was trying to, as he put it, she was trying to save her ass, is what she was trying to do. And but no, I mean, that was just in underground little dark little nightclubs that kind of stuff was being done. But no, it was awful. It was just couldn't talk about it at all. It just thank God for Barry Goldwater, because we just kept hammering him, because the election year was shortly after that, 1964.
In more recent times, after 9/11, the industry, the comedy industry, had a real difficult time as to figure out how best to deal with the subject, and that's my recent memory of that. And it took a little bit of time before it to sort of come back.
Well, it was a little bit contrived when Rudy Giuliani went on Saturday Night Live and almost made it an official proclamation that it's okay to be funny again. Mm-hmm. And when September 11th happened, 4 shows canceled by mutual agreement. He said, yeah, nobody feels like being funny now. I remember somebody from PBS, I ran into him around that time. He said, you guys are finished, meaning all comedians, because irony is dead. That's what he said. Irony is dead. And he was right. It wasn't dead permanently, but it was just dead for a while. And so I did have a group that did not cancel. And it was the town of Sturgis, Michigan. They had the Chamber of Commerce, and all the folks came. And my wife and I had been in New York a few days earlier. We went to Ground Zero. And then I went to Sturgis. And on the plane, I'm thinking, I cannot start this show as usual. I cannot do it. I've got to address this subject, which is on everybody's minds. And so I told the audience, I was introduced, and I got up there and I said, well, we're all thinking about this one tragedy. And I was in New York yesterday, and I told him about not so much Ground Zero, but walking down 7th Avenue. For block after block after block are all these reproduced photographs of victims. And people are looking for them. Have you seen my sister? Have you seen my father? Have you seen my brother? Thousands of these. They were pasted on the lampposts and on the shop windows, on the sidewalk, for block after block after block. And these were happy pictures. These were wedding pictures. These were pictures of people in front of Christmas trees and bathing suits at the beach. And I'm telling them this. I'm free associating what this was like. And the night before was Bush's speech, joint session of Congress. It went over very well. In my opinion, one of his two big moments were the bullhorn at Ground Zero, "We can hear you," and the other one was the speech before Congress. And I said, I watched the president last night, and I thought he was great. And then I said, boy, have I changed. And that got a little giggle. See, now maybe I'm taking baby steps, and I'm crawling back in to do the show. So after it was over, they said, we were going to cancel you. We didn't know how you were going to handle this, but we liked the way you handled it. And so that's how I handled it, because you couldn't ignore it.
Right.
And I think back when Kennedy was, and I'm the only one working today who was working when Kennedy was assassinated. But I was just a kid then, and I was just, if somebody hit me over the head with a plank, I was just in a daze for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so when Reagan was shot, I worked that night, because late in the afternoon, the story took another turn. Reagan was out of danger. He wasn't going to die. And then what happened? Al Haig went on television and says, I'm in charge. And he got it wrong. He got the succession of powers wrong. Secretary of State is not next. Vice President's next. Then what? Speaker of the House. And then it goes down.
President Pro Tem.
Yeah, President Pro Tem. And so I come out, and there weren't many people in the audience, enough people. Reagan had just been shot. And so a few people. And they're thinking, how's he going to handle this? And that's what I said. I said, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to handle it? Our founders knew how to handle a situation like this. It's in the Constitution. It's clear. In the event of the debilitation of a president, the Secretary of State will arm wrestle the Secretary of Defense for power. Because the Secretary of Defense, who was Caspar Weinberg, he thought he was in charge. But they were both wrong. But anyway, that was a little levity to move along. And,
Sure.
you know.
Some guys just lend themselves to comedy, like a Dan Quayle and Al Haig. Are you able to use certain names much longer than others? Are there...
A procedural question. Can the audience hear your questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think Haig would be thrilled with you equating him with Dan Quayle.
Oh, true.
But anyway,
Yeah. Yes.
Quayle and George W. Bush, that's a little more... yeah, you know, that's stuff that's so obvious. I hate those stories,
Right.
like Quayle. And some of the other things that I'm a little uncomfortable with stories that everybody gloms onto. Where the late night guys lead with stories like that. Cheney shooting the guy, Quayle. I've got a quote in my office by Will Rogers, who said his favorite jokes are the ones that don't get the biggest laughs. They're the ones that require a little bit of thought. And those are my favorite too, but you don't want too many of those in succession or people are going to nod off. But yeah, Quayle was, he's looking pretty smart these days by comparison, by the way. Well, the General Bush reference, it's permanent. He's not dumb, but this lack of curiosity is costing us, and it's costing him his legacy. If you don't read books, if you don't read the newspaper, fine, but don't brag about it. If you're going to brag about it just to get to the NASCAR people who incidentally read books, it's pathetic in my humble opinion.
You know, Buffalo really lays claim to you, and they're very proud to have you as one of their own, and as they do this person as well.
Millard Fillmore. I have a photograph of me kneeling at Millard Fillmore's grave at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Buffalo. And I did it as a joke, just to be a wise guy. In my introduction, I have the introducer say, now let us welcome comedian, piano player, and Buffalo's finest export since President Millard Fillmore. And half the time they mispronounce it. They say Millard. He was lucky 13. He was the 13th president of the United States. And somebody died. Zachary Taylor died. Zachary Taylor was only president for less than a year, I think.
Right.
And Millard Fillmore was vice president. He was represented the Know Nothing Party, and they were anti-papist, anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant. And he wasn't too cool on slavery either. But he was Buffalo's. Now, the other president from Buffalo, Grover Cleveland, was in that space between between Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt. Two giants, Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt. Cleveland was the most outstanding in that group. And he was president twice, with Benjamin Harrison in the middle, between two of them. And but Millard Fillmore, he's a punchline, not bad. And there's a Millard Fillmore Society. I don't know if they're still around, but they're very proud. And they have. It has gotten back to me that they were not amused when I take a couple of shots at Millard. They were kind of like the Daughters of the American Revolution. They were a local group of Fillmore. And there's a big main street in Buffalo. Fillmore, Broadway, Fillmore, two great intersections.
Sure. What would you've done obviously a lot of television specials, and but do you enjoy the crowd reaction more than sort of a television piece of the puzzle, or which when you're looking out at an audience, the studio audience versus a large Chautauqua type audience, or does it make a difference?
Yeah, it's a difference, because when we did specials in Buffalo, the audience was a couple hundred, and Chautauqua was 5,000. Right. So that's, you've got strength in numbers. Yeah, they're better shows. Right. I know you taped one of my shows with your equipment. And that's really the only record I have. We did tape one for WNED in Buffalo years ago, but they only had a couple of cameras, and the sound, even though we had 5,000 people there that night, it sounded like there were about 37 people. Mm-hmm. And so you have these technical problems. We had maybe two cameras, and so when if you see something on HBO with a comedian, you look at the credits, about 6 cameras. You get all kinds of angles and audience shots and things like that. Also, in Buffalo, I mean, we did a show every other month, so I couldn't, if I still had a joke that was still getting a big reaction, I couldn't repeat it, obviously. And so those are the little problems of that show. I was never really happy with the shows. The last one was probably the best, and it was a 1-hour show, and that was I didn't know it at the time, but it was the last one.
And the show like that, are you looking against the clock as well?
Yeah, we were literally live, not live on tape, right. live. So you got all the clinkers and the lapses of memory and the jokes that bombed. You got all that. And that was, as far as the clock goes, we had a clock. We didn't figure out to do this till years later, because sometimes I come up short or I run over. Now, on all the shows you see on television, even if they're live, which they're not, when they go to a commercial, they've got time to reconnoiter and say, we're running a little short here, so speed this up, or we won't have this last guest. a lot of times on the Tonight Show, they'll scrub a guest because they're gone over and have the guests come back later. Well, PBS, no commercials.
Right.
So once I started, we couldn't do that. And so we'd have a clock that started running back. When I had 5 minutes left, the clock would start clicking backwards. But it took us years to figure out to get a clock like that. I would get time cues. The guy'd hold up a sign, 3 minutes and all that, but I could end it right on the button. One time, there's a clip of Jackie Gleason, and his show, I guess, was live. Incredible.
Yeah.
He used to do a big variety show on Saturday night. The one in Miami. And for some strange reason, he was 7 minutes short. And I saw this on a documentary about Gleason. Now, you don't know he's short, but then they tell you in this documentary, he's got 7 minutes, and there's no script. He's got 7 minutes to fill. And boy, did he fill it. I mean, he just started telling jokes, and he's doing impersonations, and he's doing Jimmy Cagney, you dirty rat, and he's doing Peter Lorre, don't be frightened. It was hilarious. And when you know he's short like that,
Yeah.
it was, you really admire the guy.
Because you kind of know every one of your segments, your shtick. That's a 2-minute one, a 3-minute one, a 5-minute.
Oh no, I don't. I don't know. No, not individually. No, I don't. No, I don't time anything if it's not television.
Right.
I have an idea.
Right.
If it's going to be a 90-minute, then I'll do it. And if it's 90 minutes, I think the Chautauqua recently. It ran over 90 minutes. It was almost 2 hours. Again, 5,000 people.
Yeah.
But that's okay. But on television, you have to be right on the button.
This was a great show, by the way.
Thank you.
I mean, that was just spectacular.
I'll give you an example how I tailor it. I do a thing where I talk about outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
Outsourcing. 10 years ago, nobody had an idea what outsourcing was, where you dial 911 and you get a lady in India. And she says, where are you calling from? Now I tailor that. See, I'll localize that. If I'm in Cincinnati, I'll say to the lady, where are you calling from? Cincinnati. Ooh, Pete Rose got screwed. See how local. Or sorry, at Chautauqua, there was so much fuss about. Well, I'll do. Where are you calling from? Chautauqua, Lake Chautauqua, New York. Ooh, serving wine at the Athenaeum, the devil's handiwork.
That got a huge laugh. Oh, that's terrific.